I'm Sylvie now.
Oh, you changed your name? Brilliant.
It's called an alias.
It's not very Loki-like.
What exactly makes a Loki a Loki?
Hi, I'm Charlotte. Welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to try to answer one of the questions that underpin the Loki series. Is Sylvie a Loki? So in this video, I'm going to have a look at what the first 3 episodes have told us about this question. Now, for the moment, we do not have many elements to answer the other question that underpins this one. What makes a Loki a Loki? Because so far, although we have been told that the TVA has pruned many Loki variants, we have only seen 2 Loki variants, Loki and Sylvie. And in fact, we really know just one, MCU Loki. Technically, we already know 2 versions of MCU Loki actually, the one from the Sacred Timeline and the main Loki variant that we are following with this series. But in this analysis, I will assume that these 2 Lokis haven't diverged for long enough to be truly different and still share the same core characteristics. So what I will do here is I will try to list some of Loki's defining characteristics as a character. I will have a look at the characterization of both Loki and Sylvie in the first 3 episodes and try and see how similar and different they really are. For this purpose, I will use 4 pairs of adjectives that I think define the core characteristics of the Loki we know from the MCU and from the first episodes of the series. Number 1, Loki is talkative and manipulative. Loki, among other things, is the god of illusions and lies. He's also sometimes referred to as silver tongue because he likes to manipulate people through language. One running joke on the show is characters pointing out how much Loki loves to talk. Mobius says it in the elevator when he first meets him.
Well, I don't like to talk, but you do like to lie, because we both know you love to talk.
Then he mocks him again about this a few minutes later.
The idea that your little club decides the fate of trillions of people at the behest of 3 space lizards, yes, it's funny.
I thought you didn't like to talk.
Then in episode 2 he complains about Loki's constant yakking.
Just shut up, please. I mean, what happened to the guy I met on the elevator who didn't like to talk? Now I'm stuck with this guy who won't stop yakking away about what makes a Loki tick.
We then see Sylvie make a similar joke in the superstore.
Thank you for helping me stall for time. You really do love to hear yourself talk.
You're not the first person to tell me.
What?
And during episode 3 she keeps telling him to shut up.
I get to be the timekeepers.
Shut up! Can you shut up? Just because I have to work with you doesn't mean I want to hear your voice.
So this is a major difference already. Sylvie does not really like to talk. She has no time to lose. And even though her enchantment could be seen as a form of mental manipulation, her style when she's in action seems to be a lot more about hitting people than trying to talk them into things, as Loki himself points out several times throughout episode 3.
Brute force is no substitute for diplomacy and guile.
Noted.
We can't fight our way onto that train.
Who said anything about fighting?
All your plans involve fighting.
Interestingly though, the episode shows both of them as rather bad liars.
Taking this one to Sharu.
Okay.
Orders come from the top to get her on this train.
Could that charge the temper?
Maybe. Okay, hand it over.
Pitiful. You're gonna have to try harder than that.
And it also shows both their approaches failing when they try to deal with the badass woman in a trailer.
You're as beautiful as I
Which one was that? Diplomacy?
Don't.
Or...
So in a way, we could say that they have 2 very different ways of trying to get what they want from people, but one characteristic that they do share is a tendency to overestimate their ability to do so. 2. Loki is privileged and entitled. The episode uses various ways of highlighting the difference between Loki and Sylvie's life experiences. Loki grew up as a prince, and he tends to act very entitled. As we well know, he's fond of reminding people that he's a prince, that he has a royal standing, and that he was born to be a king. Sylvie, on the other hand, seems to have lived a very different life, probably being plucked out of her timeline by the TVA at a very early age and being on the run ever since. One way the episode evidences the difference in their upbringing is their attitude to physical effort. Sylvie is a lot fitter than Loki. We see that Loki is exhausted after running, then he can't keep up with her, and then he mentions he's never walked so much in his entire life, which Sylvie identifies immediately as a sign of privilege.
You know, I don't think I've ever walked this much in my life.
That's a pretty good life.
And Loki's suggestion that Sylvie could enchant him and walk for the both of them really drives home the idea that he's used to other people serving him and quite averse to making efforts. By the way, this is quite ironic when you know that Tom Hiddleston is actually super fit and he does an awful lot of running. In fact, Sofia Di Martino has just posted a video on Instagram of him commuting to the set by running while everyone is coming by car. And that was something that Samuel L. Jackson had actually already mentioned when they were filming Kong Skull Island. So he did a good job at pretending to be unfit. Another means of highlighting the difference in Loki and Sylvie's upbringings is the use of different accents and ways of talking. Loki has a very posh accent. Tom Hiddleston's English is very RP, upper middle class English. And he also uses a very sophisticated vocabulary.
If you could possibly sheathe your smarm for a moment, I have an offer for you. That's why I found you.
Sylvie sounds British too, but she has a much less posh accent. Apparently, Sofia Di Martino confirmed that they deliberately decided to have her speak in her regional accent. She is from Nottingham, in England. She sounds a lot more working class and also uses less elegant vocabulary.
Love is hate.
Oh, piss off. You arsehole. You killed us!
Maybe we can fix it.
So again, the show points out that they are similar but different. Two British accents, which set them apart from the rest of the cast, but not the same British accent. 3. Loki is mischievous and chaotic. This is probably one of the most obvious differences between Loki and Sylvie and their behavior. Loki is the god of mischief, and I like to use the same definition as Tom Hiddleston, an inclination to playfulness. Loki hates anything that he deems boring, he needs constant stimulation, and he hates making effort. He loves to have fun more than anything, and he gets easily distracted as well. In episode 3, we can see him getting drunk, singing, drawing too much attention to himself, and compromising the mission. Meanwhile, Sylvie seems to behave like the adult in the room, who always stays focused on her mission and on how to get out of their situation, and gets really annoyed by Loki's nonchalant attitude.
You're not a serious man.
You're right. I'm a god.
You're a clown.
I'm hedonistic. That's what I do.
I'm hedonistic. A lot more than you, I assure you, but never at the expense of the mission.
There is in fact nothing very playful or mischievous about Sylvie. On the contrary, she takes things very seriously and she's not here to play games.
Can we get on with this now?
So in a way, while Sylvie might be a force of chaos, if you consider the function of her character, the function that she serves, which is to disrupt the forces of order represented by the TVA, if you focus on her characterization, her behavior is really not depicted as chaotic at all. She always remains focused on the mission. She's efficient, she hates losing time, and she's apparently a long-term planner. She really insists that her plan that Loki ruined was years in the making. And indeed, her plan did take a lot of patience and careful planning and execution. It required finding all the apocalypses she could use to hide in, creating nexus events that would attract TVA workers, killing them, stealing their time reset charges, repeating that process until she had enough of them to bomb the sacred timeline. So that was quite a plan. Loki, on the other hand, was as chaotic as ever in episode 3, coming up with often terrible ideas, improvising, taking his sweet time even though time was critical, never truly planning his next move, and often failing at what he was trying to do. Loki likes to think of himself as a planner and a strategist because he's very clever, but he's really much better at improvisation and thinking outside the box. This is what allowed him to find a solution to Mobius's problem in episode 2, for example, to find that the variant likes to hide in apocalypses. No one else had thought about this because no one else has the same way of thinking as Loki. He saw that the answer was not in the files, it was in the timeline itself. So what Loki's really good at is thinking on his feet and trying to make the best out of any situation. Sometimes successfully, sometimes not. An example of how this can go terribly wrong is the first Thor movie, in which Loki triggers a whole series of dramatic events that completely spiral out of his control just because he wanted to rain on Thor's parade, or should I say coronation, by having a few frost giants infiltrate Asgard. On the contrary, one of the most successful examples of his ability to improvise and turn any situation to his advantage is in Thor: The Dark World. He starts out in prison, takes advantage of Thor's offer to break him out, then figures out on the spot an improvised device to kill the curse, gets stabbed in the chest in the process, but miraculously does not die. He immediately sees an opportunity to escape life in prison, decides to let Thor believe he's dead, takes the chance to impersonate an Asgardian soldier when one comes looking for them, and usurps Odin's throne while Thor is still off fighting Malekith. In the series, we see more examples of this ability when, for example, he snatches Mobius's time twister only a few seconds after having had a big emotional crisis. We see it again when he snatches the TemPad from Sylvie and saves them from Renslayer at the last minute, although only to land them into the worst of all apocalyptic scenarios. Sylvie seems completely different in that regard, and she actually calls him out on his inability to make plans by making fun of what he calls a plan.
Plans have multiple steps. Dressing as a guard and getting on a train is just doing a thing.
Which is actually a very accurate assessment of Loki's attitude to planning. This difference between them is also highlighted by this sequence. Sylvie is completely defeated because the TemPad is broken, and in her mind that was the only way of that planet. Loki, on the other hand, is still trying to find solutions and think outside the box, and he comes up with a pretty decent one, in fact, trying to get on the Ark, because as he points out, usually they're not there.
The Ark never leaves because it's destroyed.
Never had us on it.
Of course, the plan fails because they don't have enough time to carry it out, but it was, in theory, a good plan, and Sylvie could not have come up with it because she was too focused on her one objective, getting the TemPad back. Finally, another means of highlighting their difference in that regard is body language. Compare how Sylvie walks through the time door at the beginning of episode 3. Classy, cool, collected. And she ties her hair before getting to serious business. She looks like a very organized person. Now look at how Loki walks through the time door. He does make a half-hearted attempt at taming his hair, but as we know, Loki never ties his hair. To keep it out of the way while fighting, he prefers to use multiple dramatic hair flips. Another similar thing can be observed when they are running. Sylvie runs in a rather athletic fashion and in a straight line, at least as much as one can when meteors are raining from the sky. Loki's running style, on the other hand, yep. Look how he crashes into that door. So in a way we could say that in terms of the function that these two characters serve, they both are agents of chaos. Both of them have the function of disrupting order. But if you look at their behavior, they're not so similar. Loki is clearly chaotic in his behavior, but Sylvie is not. 4. Loki is insecure and narcissistic. This last point, I think, might turn out to be one of the major themes in the series. Some people began to wonder whether the interaction between Loki and Sylvie could actually have a romantic element, especially after the series head writer Michael Waldron called episode 3 the most romantic episode, and in another interview called Loki the ultimate narcissist. This leads me to think that the relationship between Loki and Sylvie, while not necessarily romantic, as Kate Herron said herself, might be intended as a commentary on narcissism. Narcissus in Greek mythology is a young man who is incapable of love and eventually falls in love with his own reflection in the water, which serves as a mirror. The story does not end well. Narcissus either kills himself or wastes away and dies because of this impossible love. The word narcissism also inspired psychoanalysts and psychiatrists who coined this expression narcissistic personality disorder, which is more or less another name for megalomania. Michael Waldron called Loki the ultimate narcissist, and indeed, if you look up the definition of narcissism, you will find things like a fragile ego, a tendency to belittle other people to feel superior to them, arrogant or haughty behavior, being envious of others, a sense of entitlement. Now, how does this apply to the series? But first, we can see that visually, several moments were meant to evoke this idea of Loki and Sylvie being mirror images of one another. This was actually intentional, as Sofia Di Martino confirmed in a recent interview. The choreography was meant to create mirror images. In addition to this, there are also a few parallels. For example, Sylvie's nap in episode 3 can be seen as an echo of Loki's nap in episode 2. And we also see Sylvie taking off her horned helmet to use it as a weapon, something we saw another Loki do in Thor Ragnarok. So the choreography clearly intends to show that these two characters do share a number of characteristics, even though, as we've seen, their body language does not always match. Regarding the dialogue, the situation is more complex. There is a clear tendency to focus more on the differences than the similarities. Sylvie is adamant that she does not want to be called Loki. She repeatedly rejects this identification, and she points out that she's her own person.
Say you. Loki.
Ugh, don't call me that.
This isn't about you. Don't ever call me that.
Texani.
No, a Loki.
I'm sorry, but I'm not calling some faded photocopy of me Loki.
Good, because that's not who I am anymore. I'm Sylvie now.
In contrast, Loki seems quite intent on seeing himself in Sylvie, and although he often makes remarks that point out that he does not really recognize himself in her, he seems to lament the fact more than anything. He seems rather disappointed that she's not, in fact, a mirror image of him.
I would never treat me like this.
You really got nothing else better to do.
Rude. You sure you're a Loki? I'd never have done that.
Yeah? Well, I'm not you.
Oh, you changed your name. Brilliant.
It's called an alias.
It's not very Loki-like.
Not very surprisingly, they also immediately enter a kind of competitive relationship where they're trying to show that they're the superior Loki.
Me, I presume.
Please. If anyone's anyone, you're me.
And here I was worried that they found a better version of me.
I found your hiding place like that. I'd say that makes me the superior Loki, wouldn't you?
I'll kill you then.
Or I'll kill you.
So they are both competitive, but I'd say they are competitive in different ways. Loki seems to be stuck in the same need for validation that pushed him to always compare himself to Thor, because he's insecure and he has low self-esteem. Sylvie's attitude seems to be less motivated by a need for validation, and maybe more by a vengeful state of mind when it comes to Loki's. She rejects the name very forcefully, so I wonder if we will not find out at one point that she has history with another Loki variant. I will finish this point on narcissism by focusing on what, in my opinion, may be the most interesting line in episode 3. The dagger metaphor is mocked for being terrible, but it is actually quite interesting, especially this part.
You can see yourself in it. It's beautiful.
You can see yourself in it. It is beautiful. In a way, it explains why Loki has been so unhappy in love, as he has just admitted in the previous scene. Not only does he represent love as a weapon, which is not a very positive way of representing love, but he also seems more interested in loving himself through another person than actually loving another person. So the usual saying that you first need to learn to love yourself in order to be able to love another person seems to apply here. Loki's narcissism is linked to his deep-seated insecurities, and as long as he's stuck with this problem, he remains fixated on trying to find a way to love himself, and he cannot move past this and grow. Note that Sylvie explicitly rejects the metaphor, which might indicate that she does not share the same issues, that she may not be a narcissist.
Doesn't make sense, does it?
No, terrible metaphor.
Damn, I thought I had something there.
Maybe as the show progresses, Loki will have to learn to recognize that it is futile to try and recognize himself in Sylvie, and even more futile to try and love himself through her. And recognizing that Sylvie is not him might in fact help him finally grow out of his narcissism. In conclusion, I would say that characterization so far has tended to demonstrate that Sylvie and Loki are in fact similar, but also probably more different than similar. They do share some characteristics which manifest mostly visually in their moves, but in fact they are clearly not the same character at all. Sylvie does not really share any of Loki's defining traits. Of course, the show clearly intends to raise the question of essentialism versus existentialism. Essentialism tends to focus more on a person's essence as something that defines them and cannot be changed, while existentialism tends to focus more on lived experiences and how we build our own self through our choices. This of course ties into other questions that are central to the show, such as nature versus nurture or free will versus determinism. For example, if truly Loki is a narcissist while Sylvie isn't, it would be very interesting to ask the question, why? How did Loki turn into a narcissist and not Sylvie? Because apparently it is not in their essence to be a narcissist. To go further on these issues, however, we would need more information on Sylvie's origins, and also we might meet new Loki variants, and then we will be able to see whether they share any characteristics of Loki and Sylvie. Thank you very much for watching. Hit the subscribe button if you're interested in more analysis about the Loki series. Have a glorious day. Bye bye.